Now let's see how dhcpv6 stateful works on the wire. On this packet capture, we have a client and a server. Those two devices are directly connected, so we are not going to have any relay agents in between. Let's start with the first message. The first message is a solicit sent by the client, and the server will respond with an advertised message. Later on, their client will respond to this advertised message with a request message, and finally the server will reply to this request message with a reply message. Okay, let's start by the solicit message. So at the layer 3, we can see the IPv6 base header, and we can see that the next header field is UDP. This time UDP is used as the transfer protocol for dhcpv6 messages. The source field is a link local address, meaning that the client has configured an IPv6 link local address, and the destination field is a multicast address. The client would send this communication to this multicast address to look for a relay agent or a dhcpv6 server. In our case, it's not a relay agent, but it's a dhcpv6 server that will find this message. Now let's go straight to the dhcpv6 message. We can see that the type is solicit. Now let's see is the client identifier. So the client has to generate a unique identifier to identify itself to the server. So this is the identifier, and this identifier was made with the link local address and the time. Now let's look for what this client wants from the server. The client wants this identity association for non-temporary address. This means that he is looking for an IPv6 address to use on the network. Apart from this identity association, the client also wants option request option, and that is the domain name to use and an IPv6 address of a resolver on this network. Now the server will respond with the advertised message. At the layer 3, the source, this global unicast address from this prefix 2001, and this destination is the link local address of the client. Now let's go straight to the dhcpv6 message. So we can see that the type is advertised. Now the server wants to identify itself to the client, so it's going to generate an identifier. The type is link layer address plus the time, and the server is going to embed the client identifier generated by the client and put in the solicit message, and after that the server will respond to the information request. So the client wants an identity association for non-temporary address, so the server will pick from the range the administrator has configured on the server to the customer. And remember that the client also wants a domain name, so the domain name is corp.contosgo.com, and the last option requested by the client was the IPv6 address of the resolver, and the server will provide the IPv6 address of the resolver. Now let's see what is the response of the client. When the client will receive this advertise, the client will create a request message. Again, at the layer 3, we see that from the client to the server is the multicast communication, so the destination is the same multicast address. The source is the client links local address. Let's go to the dhcpv6. The type is request. The client will consider the information sent by the server and populate the identity association with the information sent by the server. The client identifier to identify itself to the server. The client now embed the server identifier because the server sent its identifier. The identity association, remember that in the solicit the identity association was empty. Now it's no more empty because he has received a proposal from the server, so he's going to populate it, and the option request is going to be the same. So the client said that okay, I still want the domain name and the name server. Finally, the server will respond to this request with a reply. And let's jump to the dhcpv6 message. The type is reply, the server identifier, the client identifier, and the identity association sent. And finally, the option request options, we have the domain search list and the IPv6 address of the DNS resolver. These are the communication that happened between the client and the server to illustrate how dhcpv6 stateful works. And finally, the server records this identity association as a new client binding. The client, before to use this IPv6 address, must run duplicate address detection to ensure that on this link there is no host that is using this same IPv6 address.